From January 1975 through May 31st, 2009, there have been a total of 213,814 crossing accidents, which were reported by the railroads to the National Response Center. Closer examination reveals that over 20,000 people were killed in these accidents, and another 79,469 people were injured. Shocking statistics were recently reported by the Federal Railroad Administration regarding railroad-related accidents and injuries. It is estimated that cars and trains collide every 12 minutes, with a total of 9,570 train incidents and accidents in the year 2009. Here are some disturbing statistics. Of the 9,570 train wrecks, 649 people were killed and 6,686 people were injured. The average train weighs 12 million pounds, so the weight ratio of a train to a car is about 4,000 to 1. This compares to the weight ratio of a car to an aluminum can. A train traveling at 50 miles per hour, pulling 100 cars, takes 1 mile to stop. So in a contest between a car and a train, the train obviously and always wins. The motorist in a train motor vehicle collision is 40 times more likely to die than in a collision between two motor vehicles. This fact is a real shocker. As of December 2009, the United States had 136,041 public ad-grade railroad crossings. Of these crossings, approximately 42,301 have gates, 22,039 have flashing lights, and 1,196 have highway traffic signals, wigwags, and bells. So do the math. The remaining railroad crossings, approximately 72,000 in America today, over 50% have nothing. No warning lights, no gates, and nothing to protect drivers. Plus, to make matters even worse, not only are these 72,000 crossings unprotected, many of them are overgrown with weeds, trees, and other types of vegetation, and or have broken signals or gates that the railroad has failed to repair that make these crossings so very dangerous. Today, the Insider Exclusive goes behind the headlines in a two-part TV exclusive, Death on the Tracks, Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad, $24 million cover-up Part 2, to show how Robert Potroff, partner at the Potroff Law Offices, successfully uncovered an illegal, unethical, and sinister corporate policy at Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad that put company profits before public safety. At approximately 10 p.m. on September 26, 2003, a Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railway Company freight train traveling west at over 60 miles per hour slammed into a car at Ferry Street just north of Highway 10 in Anoka, Minnesota, and annihilated 4 young people: Brian Fraser, Bridget Shannon, Corey Chase, and Harry Rhodes. The car, a Chevy Cavalier, was literally torn apart and its parts were shredded into tiny little pieces. The vehicle and the 4 young people it carried were scattered hundreds of feet from the point of impact. Burlington Northern's immediate response as to the cause of the tragedy was to point the finger at the driver, who they say ignored a warning signal and tried to beat the crossing gate. But a jury absolutely and positively disagreed with them. This is an unbelievable story of disgrace and shame, where a major Fortune 500 company, namely Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railway Company, that didn't give a damn about the law, thought it was above the law, and broke the law time and time again to cover up its own deadly mistakes. It's a story where there was such a staggering pattern of misconduct aimed at covering up Burlington Northern's role in the deaths of these 4 people that it will totally shock you. Burlington Northern knew no bounds in breaking the law and thumbing their noses at the United States judicial system. And they played dirty, real dirty. Some of the unbelievable and illegal tactics they pulled will surprise even the most hardened criminals. Burlington Northern refused to produce the locomotive for an inspection by the state reconstruction team. They withheld data from locomotive event recorders from the police, as well as from the event recorders in the crossing. They attacked Bob Potroff and his team of lawyers in an attempt to prevent disclosure of the truth about the accident. And get this, Burlington Northern's own locomotive event recorder data completely discredited their engineer's story. They destroyed the voice recordings by the Signal Department's personnel after the accident. They covered up the work records that showed maintenance problems by filtering the relevant information out of the records produced. They falsified a phony document of the purported data from the signal system that allegedly proved the lights and gates were working properly at the time of the accident. They destroyed the computer that was used to download the signal system data. They lied to the court about the non-existence of any electronic files from which the paper copy of the purported data was printed. They lied to the court about electronic files discovered at the court-ordered inspection. They perjured themselves about the existence of electronic files stored on the railroad's mainframe computer. Their managers intimidated railroad witnesses. Bob and his lawyers also unraveled an elaborate scheme by the railroad to wrongfully target one of the kids as the driver so that it could launch a character assassination, point to his poor driving record, blame him for the accident, and deny his child any recovery. They pretended to settle the case with the 4 victims' families and then refused to pay after the settlement, claiming that new witnesses had been found to help their own case. Only problem was, the Burlington Northern's new witnesses had been bribed by the company. That's right, bribed. They paid them $5,000 and $10,000 each and provided them with their version of the facts needed to help their own case. The jury didn't want to hear any more of this egregious and unethical conduct and awarded a damage verdict of $24 million. But the biggest, most glaring illegal tactic that Burlington Northern engaged in was the missing electronic evidence. Railway crossing gates and lights are controlled and recorded by a box, the equivalent of a black box in an airplane. Burlington refused to give a copy of this electronic downloads to the police at the time of the investigation. Washington County Judge Ellen Moss had heard and watched enough, and the court, after finding the railroad guilty of destroying and fabricating evidence to support its own case, ordered sanctions, fees, and costs of $4.5 million for the railroad's staggering pattern of misconduct. Bob Potroff and his team of lawyers have earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as some of the best train accident lawyers in the country, fighting for victims of railroad companies in the battle for railroad safety. And because of that, they are driven to fight for people who have been harmed by the willful or negligent actions of others. Their goals? Not only to get justice for their clients, but to make sure that all railroad companies implement the maximum safety protections that all Americans need and deserve, and obey and follow the law. Hi, I'm Steve Murphy, and this is the Insider Exclusive, live from Minneapolis, Minnesota, with the Potroff Law Offices. It is my great privilege to introduce Bob Potroff to the show. Welcome to the show, Bob.
Thank you.
With this particular case that we're going to be discussing today, a Burlington Northern case, Chase versus Burlington Northern, not only did you get a $24 million verdict, but you also got one of the largest sanctions in the history of this country almost. What, $4.5 million?
$4.5 million in costs and sanctions for the behavior of the railroad during this case.
Tell us what happened in this case, please.
It was a Friday night following homecoming football game. Mm-hmm. 4 kids some from different schools. They were all acquaintances. Were getting together to go see off one of their friends who was deploying to Iraq. And as they got together and were headed to this gathering, they came up to a railroad crossing at Ferry Street in Anoka, Minnesota, and without notice, there was a train coming 60 miles an hour down the track. The lights and gates weren't working, they heard nothing, and within 1 second, the car had been ripped in half and the lives of the 4 children had been taken.
What was the immediate response as to the cause of this crash by the railroad?
The railroad hit the ground quickly. They told the police that the lights and gates were working just fine and that the engineer would confirm that the gate was down at the time of the accident, and that it was clearly 4 kids who had run around a gate and in essence killed themselves.
And they also, somewhere along the line, an empty bottle of liquor was introduced and gave the public the idea that these kids were probably drunk to begin with, right?
Well, yeah, at some point, someone went out to the wreckage for filming purposes and took an alcohol bottle and set it up on the wreckage and staged it, so that one of the pictures that would be left with the public's eye is alcohol related to this Friday evening crash.
Right.
Despite the fact there was no alcohol in the systems in any of these kids.
Right, and toxicology reports proved that, didn't it?
Correct.
Now, whenever you're pursuing a case against the railroad, you know in advance there's going to be hanky-panky, if you will. There's going to be shenanigans that the defense is going to implement and use to try and prevent you from proving your case, right?
Well, I've learned over the last couple decades that the railroad owns almost all the evidence. They own the scene of the accident. They train law enforcement. So when I come in and do my investigation, I start from scratch with the things that are irrebuttable, the physical hard evidence that no one can change. And I've just got too much baggage from prior experiences to tell me that don't take what the railroad tells you at face value in these cases or you'll be led astray.
In pursuing getting that evidence, what are some of the problems that you ran into?
Well, in this case, the big problems were the event recorders. There's an event recorder on the train that should have been produced immediately to law enforcement and to us.
Just a black box.
The black box would have told the speed of the train, the braking, and the things that happened at the time of impact.
Right.
There's an event recorder or a black box in the signal system itself that would have told if the gate was up or down at the time that car went through.
That disappeared too, didn't it?
It was also gone.
Yeah.
They didn't produce it for law enforcement, and they never produced it for us. Instead, they had witnesses who assured them that the gate was working fine. That's a red flag immediately, and fortunately, there were lots of cameras that showed up at this accident scene, and the cameras catch things that are given as the truth. There was a skid mark on the right-hand side of the road that made it obvious to me and any decent reconstruction expert that car could not have gone around a gate and been in the location of that skid mark at the time of impact because it couldn't turn that sharply.
How much missing evidence was there in this case?
Oh my, from the electronic evidence, the locomotive itself was taken out of state so it couldn't be used for the recreation. There was maintenance records, which almost 5 years after this accident, we finally get maintenance records that shows the day before this accident, they were working on the rails within the signal circuit that would have caused problems with the signal system.
Yeah.
But that evidence had been missing or hidden for all that period of time. All the maintenance records about this crossing were hidden or missing. There were records, I can't even begin to tell you, the voice tapes where the signal system people called into the railroad and discussed their problems ended up missing. The signal diagrams that would have told us how that signal was actually installed and operating that day came up missing.
Through your efforts, you were able to kind of reconstruct what actually happened, and you did that with an animation video, didn't you?
Our animation was based upon the very hard, cold physical evidence. We were able to take the photographs from different law enforcement agencies, locate exactly where the physical evidence was, and then very meticulously, one step at a time, recreate exactly what happened for this evidence to all end up in the location it was following the accident.
When you go to prove a case and the other side is not presenting the evidence as they're required by law, this is a challenge in and of itself. It's hard to get to the truth, right?
The first challenge you have is convincing a judge that, Judge, this is really going on.
Yeah.
They're really hiding evidence.
Because a judge doesn't assume that this would happen?
It's hard to believe that in today's American jurisprudence that there are parties, huge corporations, that have the audacity to tamper with evidence, hide evidence, present false evidence, fabricate evidence, and that's not the norm. So my first level of proof is to the judge that, Judge, you've at least got to let us go the extra mile during the battle in preparing for this case so that we can prove to you what they've been doing. And ultimately, we got that leeway from this judge. We filed 13 motions to compel, had numerous evidentiary hearings, and the judge got it. She could see after a while that this wasn't an isolated incident of, oops, we forgot to save something. It was a very well-programmed practice of making sure that the relevant evidence that was damaging never showed up.
Today we also have with us one of the mothers of one of the kids that passed away in this accident, Linda Rhodes, and we're going to bring her on so she can tell a little bit about her version of what happened and how your firm represented her. So let's bring her on right now. It is my great pleasure to introduce Linda Rhodes. Welcome to the show. Take us back to that day when you first learned about your son and what happened to him.
I guess I just got home from work and got a knock on the door, and the police officer came in and he asked me my name, and I told him. He says, "Is your husband home?" So I said, "Yes, he's in bed sleeping." So he told me to go wake him up, that he needed to tell us something, talk to both of us. So I did that, and they told us about an accident, and they wanted a picture of our son to identify, to see if that was him that was in the accident, because they didn't have any ID on him. So I was totally in shock. I just sat down, and then he had to ask me again.
Yeah, the unbelievable, huh?
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. It's like one of my boys and husband's in the background asking him who was it. And
My condolences to you. Tell us a little bit about your son, Harry.
Oh, gosh. He was a very well-behaved boy, listened at home and went to school and did what he had to do. He was funny. He was like the leader because he was the oldest boy, of course.
Yeah.
He had
Family.
he had some unique talents too.
Yeah.
You have
Oh,
other,
yeah.
You have other children.
Yeah, I have 4 other children besides Harry.
If you now have a chance to tell America, how corporate presidents and a management should act, if you had this chance and you have it now, what would you say to them?
How they should act?
Yeah. Not the way they acted in this case, but how they really should act.
Well, they should tell the truth.
Tell the truth, be responsible,
Be
right?
responsible. Yeah.
I want to thank you very much for taking your time to be here. I know you work at night, don't you?
Yes, I do.
So you've been up all night.
Yep.
And you just came in here and waited, and I know that took a lot, even to think about this again, And my heart goes out to you, and I'm glad you came in.
Thank you.
Bob, through the many years of experience you had fighting the railroads to get to the truth, you've come to believe that in every single case, they're going to hide the evidence, destroy evidence, and you're prepared for that, aren't you?
I'm prepared for it. The good news, if there's a bright side to this, I can tell you from 20 years ago to today, I'm seeing an effect on the preservation of evidence. I'm seeing where what we've done in these cases is creating a more honest approach to litigation and the safety ramifications that come out of fair investigations.
Yeah, and hopefully, as you mentioned earlier, law enforcement now is looking at a more objective viewpoint when the railroads give them evidence or tell them that they don't have it. They don't necessarily believe them right away, do they?
Oh, absolutely. One one accident at a time, you can convert law enforcement into saying what's really the truth.
Yeah.
When they're getting this training from the railroad, they're given a ride on a train. They're given the Kool-Aid, if you will, that they're following the railroad line. And
Right.
when you're so deeply immersed in training like that, sometimes it's hard to step back and look and go, this isn't objective. This isn't objective. This isn't right. And one law enforcement agency at a time, we're able to shine the light on that training and hopefully someday be able to get them totally objective training.
Yeah, well, the messages that I wanted to send in this show, number one, there are and there is very good trained lawyers like yourself to protect little people, you know, the small people, the average everyday people out there to fight these railroads. And the other one is not to assume that just because you get hit by a train, it's your fault.
Oh, absolutely. Never lose track of the thought that bad crossings kill good drivers.
Thank you very much for being on the program. Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.